What is up, and welcome to another edition of the Mile High Hoops podcast. As always, I am your host, Zach Bai, and as always, I appreciate you spending a sliver of your busy day right here with me on the podcast, reacting to, well, a couple things. On the basketball court, a 107-104 defeat in Houston to the Rockets, who are playing good basketball. We talked about this last week. Going in there was going to be potentially problematic. It was. And then big picture, reacting to the contract extension to Michael Malone, which I think is the bigger deal. The loss against the Rockets will be shuffled along with the rest of the season. It'll be a footnote. Some will remember, some won't. There are a couple things to remember. Mainly, historical. Another benchmark for Nikola Jokic. We'll get into that in a second. But they lose on the court. Michael Malone wins off of the court, signs his extension, adding on 2 more years to the deal that was already in place. I have several thoughts about Michael Malone and his fit in Denver, Colorado with these Nuggets. He was the perfect coach to bring them out of the depths that the organization was in on the floor. You think back to maybe 2013, 14, somewhere in there, and just how rough of a shape that this franchise was in. But there's 2 different type of coaches. Actually, there's maybe 3 different type of coaches, okay? There's the one kind is the type that can take a losing program, a losing organization, a losing culture, and try to get it from point A to point B. Try to get it out of the depths and create a culture of winning habits, winning connectivity, winning goals, and all of that. And eventually, if you foster that, then it can lead to wins on the floor. And getting an organization out of the depths is the first step, right? And Michael Malone was the perfect coach to do that. But oftentimes we've seen, not just in basketball, but certainly in basketball, but in pro sports just in general, that a coach that can do the first part, getting out of the depths, and get you from A to B, get you out of the depths to respectability, and maybe even surpassing respectability to the level of being a contender, right? We see sometimes in sports that coach that did that doesn't have the ability to actually transition from contender to a championship coach, all right? And an example here in Denver is with the Broncos, that, John Fox with the Broncos was the perfect coach to get them where they needed to be on the largest stage, but then they just couldn't break through. And in 2000 and whatever it was, 15, I think, 14, with Gary Kubiak, and he's the one to get them across the finish line. We saw this with Phil Jackson inheriting a Lakers team with Shaq and Kobe that couldn't win, and they had coaches like Del Harris or whatever. They're super talented in the playoffs, just couldn't transition to winning. And I guess you could make that same argument in Chicago with a similar arc with a young Jordan and the coaches that had preceded Doug Collins, that had preceded Phil Jackson. Anyway. There's another type of coach that maybe doesn't have the chops for the rebuild, right? So, I don't know if, and I'll use an extreme example like Phil Jackson. I don't know if Phil Jackson is the right coach for that first step of the journey, right? And I'm not talking about present day Phil. I'm talking about big picture, NBA history. Is Phil Jackson the type that could, take over a program that has a baseline of 0 and build it up to a championship contender? I don't know about that. It certainly didn't work that way in New York. But what I'm trying to say is the type of coach that can do both, right? And there was questions about that with Michael Malone here in Denver. That, okay, he had got them to a place where they're a legitimate contender. Was he the guy that could push him across the finish line? And this organization showed patience with Mike Malone during that 2-year window when Jamal Murray wasn't available, and showed patience and stuck with it and sort of, quote unquote, trusted the process of Michael Malone. And then he crosses the finish line. I just, the ability to check both of those boxes is so massively important. And I think that Michael Malone has been the perfect coach for this Denver Nuggets team. I think he's going to continue to be the perfect coach for this Nuggets team, and he deserved the extension. I'm glad that he got it. And, if you think about Michael Malone, who he is, like, in the NBA of all leagues where it's so player driven, where the players have more power than the coaches, Michael Malone has walked the perfect razor's edge of holding his guys accountable, but also being a player's coach. And that's a really, really thin line of being able to go in a press conference and blast his team, maybe unlike any other coach in the NBA. But then you hear about him, going to literally putting his arm around a guy. He has like done stuff like that, like, quote unquote, forget to put Aaron Gordon back into a game in the fourth quarter, quote unquote, forget to put Michael Porter Jr. Back in a game in the fourth quarter, and you're essentially benching the guy, right? And in the NBA, man, sometimes that can become a powder keg with $100 million pro athletes. So I just think that I don't have enough good things to say about Michael Malone. He is unapologetically, authentically himself. And he has, and will go down, for me, is the greatest coach in the history of the Denver Nuggets. And I don't even think it's particularly close. That is all due respect to one of the giants of the game, and a guy I'm lucky enough to call a personal friend, George Karl, right? That is all due respect to the legendary Doug Moe. And so this guy has separated himself because the Denver stinking Nuggets are the world champions. And the fact that those two things are in the same sentence, and he was here for every single step of the organic rebuild, you just give him his flowers. All right. Does that mean Michael Malone's going to be the coach in 6 years? It's the NBA. I don't know. But that's not really the point. This story that he has helped write in Denver is so unique and legendary. And I'll flip it. He helped write. You cannot write the story of the Denver Nuggets without Michael Malone. And that's where we're at. That's the success that they've achieved that was unprecedented until last season. So all the credit in the world. I just wanted to say that about Michael Malone. I absolutely love the extension, and so richly deserved. And he is rich now. You can be sure of that. All right. I wanted to mention this too. And we talk about this so much in football, but it rings so true in basketball as well. The Nuggets have something, I hope, special budding, and that is the hierarchy within the organization. They had this with Tim Connolly, the structure of Josh Kroenke, Tim Connolly, and Michael Malone. And now we're seeing it with Calvin Booth. I do hear whispers here and there that sometimes those guys aren't always on the same page. Like, it's pro sports, it's different personalities, it's different outlooks, right? Is Michael Malone in love with the fact that he has a bench full of young guys and not NBA veterans? I would probably guess that's not something that he's thrilled about, right? And I think he understands the bigger picture, and what Calvin Booth talked about, trying to win maybe 2 of the next 4, all that combination, 3 of the next 5 or whatever. And this is in an effort to do that. But I do think it is so vital organizationally to have ownership, a general manager or team president, and coach, and they have that synced up. And you can get caught and disjointed when you change too quickly, and then it's a general manager inheriting a head coach, or a head coach who isn't synced up, with his GM, and maybe the owner said you have to hire this coach. And I think that the Nuggets have a real organizational hierarchy that lends itself to consistency. And when you're as good as the Denver Nuggets are, consistency is what we're looking for, right? I just had that in my notes, and before we moved on, I wanted to mention that. Okay, a little bit more from going back to what happened on the basketball court this past weekend. Guys, I mentioned to you last week that this game in Houston made me nervous. Houston is a NBA town for young guys, all right? They go out in Houston. There's a ton of strip clubs in Houston. It's legendary for that. I heard Mike Evans, our morning show host, one half of Schlereth and Evans on the Fan, say, Doug Moe, he gets a second reference today, used to say, don't bet on us when we go to Los Angeles or Houston. And I'll throw Atlanta in there too. They're fun NBA towns. I'm sure some of those guys, some, not all, but I would assume some of those guys, because the game was on a Sunday, right? They're in town on a Saturday. I'm sure some of those guys were out to, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. I'm not there, just guessing. But I remember the old wisdom, Earl Boykins, telling me, that's trouble. That's trouble. So, and then in addition to that, the Rockets were just playing good basketball. They were coming off a game where they kicked the head into the Los Angeles Lakers. They had won the previous 3 before that. So I know they started 0-3 if you look back to the infancy of the season, and now they've strung together 6 consecutive wins over good basketball teams. Playoff teams from a year ago, like the Lakers, like the Kings twice, like a good Pelicans team. Like we saw them, there's something there, and now a win over the Nuggets. So. The Rockets' long layoff, by the way. They don't play until the 17th. It's the 14th today on Tuesday, and they hadn't played since Sunday. So that's interesting. That's got to be the longest break of the NBA season. But there's things to like about Houston. All right. And, I used some time on my radio show, forgot to get to it. I don't think I got to it here on the podcast, and sometimes I can get them confused. But I love the Şengün kid. I love Alperen Şengün. I think there's really something there. He's just a kid, but he's gotten stronger. You can see that. He's averaging 19 points a game, 8 rebounds. He's averaging 6 assists a game. That is really, really, really impressive. He is a kid, but we saw him. He's like transition. Maybe he's not a man, but we've saw him transition to boy, where he was for like the first 2 years, now into like a full blown kid, and his next step is to be a grown ass man. And I'm like, almost like, yo, what is this gonna look like when this kid is 23? And not 21 if he continues this arc. But enough about the Rockets. Although they're an intriguing league pass team to me. Shout out Uncle Jeff Green, who's a huge, big, legitimate part of the Nuggets championship run a year ago. He came off the bench and scored 15 points in 26 minutes. So that was kind of fun to see. I'll always root for the guys that were on that championship team a year ago, regardless of where they go. And Jeff Green, I'm sure, is on his last legs as an NBA player. So that was kind of cool to see against his former teammate. 36 points, 21 rebounds, 11 assists for Nikola Jokic. It's legendary. The only other players in NBA history to achieve those type of numbers are, Oscar Robertson, Wilt Chamberlain, and Elgin Baylor. So unique company. Jokic continues to be incredible. In related news, the sky is also blue. Water continues to be wet. But it wasn't enough. All right. And on a night where KCP, largely offensively was MIA, Porter, while didn't play a perfect game, 25 points and 10 rebounds, he is maintaining that here over the course of a couple weeks. So you absolutely love to see that. But really, the bigger story of this basketball game was just how poorly the bench played. That's really, why this team lost, in my opinion, on Sunday evening. Guys are just out there, and we're having this conversation a little bit too often here. Where Zeke Naji is just kind of out there. Peyton Watson, just kind of out there, 7 minutes, 0 points. Colin Gillespie, he was lauded after the game by Michael Malone. I don't want to get carried away with the Colin Gillespie love. I have a soft spot in my heart for him. I followed him his entire college career. But at the same time, he played well. And the fact that he might have been he was the bright spot for the Nuggets is problematic. For sure, it is. It's problematic. Christian Braun doesn't look like a confident basketball player right now. In 14 minutes, 0 points. He was a minus 11. He has come back down to earth a little bit, considering how well he was playing in the playoffs and where we thought this could go in season number 2. And it still could. But he has struggled here as of late. So let's just keep our eye on it. Julian Strawther, again, coming back down to earth pretty rapidly after, that big game against New Orleans where he had the career high 21 points. And I came in here and said, hey, I want to manage these expectations. Let's be excited in the moment, but at the same time, let's not get carried away. He's going to have nights where he may not play at all. He's going to have nights where he comes in and has 0 points because he's on a really short leash with Michael Malone, and we're seeing that. Just 8 points, 8 minutes, 0 points. That group has to get back to basics, and that is playing balls to the wall defense and trying to get out in transition, because when they're asked to operate in the half court, it's pretty ugly. Seriously, it's pretty ugly. There's not enough NBA level shooting out there, and when Strawther's not out there, it can be a rough scene. Even from a spacing standpoint, it can be a rough scene. There's very little creation in the half court, with guys off of the bounce, trying to create from the perimeter. It's not a good looking group right now. So let's just keep our eye on it. I don't want to get carried away when it's really good. I don't want to get carried away when it's really, really bad. Let's just continue to watch that unit because they have a long way to go. Next on the docket is the Los Angeles Clippers, which comes with all the history. It comes with all the personalities. I don't know if I don't dislike a lot of NBA teams. I really don't. I'm a huge fan of this league, and almost on every team, I like certain players. On this team, I like Kawhi. Kawhi's going to do a backflip into the Hall of Fame. And I like Paul George for that matter. I do. But the Russell Westbrook, James Harden combo for me, and then you throw Bones Highland on there. A lot of personality. By the way, Bones not really playing. And I just want to get to him in just a second. But this is a team that I think it has been thrown together. They probably have 4 Hall of Famers, right? No, not probably. They will have 4 Hall of Famers. But I've said this for years. Put your hands in and say, let's go be great is not a formula. When you compare how the Nuggets were built and the Clippers have been built, and now you add in James Harden, one of the most divisive personalities on and off the court, I just think they're headed to absolutely nowhere. I don't know how Tuesday night's going to go specifically on TNT at 8 o'clock for the in-season tournament. I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like. I think it's going to be a really close game if I had to guess. And if I had to bet on it, I'd pick Nuggets real small, like winning, 114 to 111, something like that. But to circle back to Bones Highland, and just to put a bow on the Clippers thing, not worry about the Clippers at all. Especially if Jamal comes back healthy, they are not on my radar in terms of a team that can legitimately beat the Nuggets 4 times over a 2-week period. But Bones Highland, man, be careful what you wish for. This guy was in such a good situation in Denver and became such a malcontent, so disappointing. And now you look and, he's had games where, he's played 6 minutes. And I don't even think that he played in their last game. Let me double check here real quick. I don't think. Yeah, he didn't play. Bones, you know what? I hope he learns. I hope he needs to grow up a little bit, and I hope he's doing that in Los Angeles. Whether he is or isn't, it's out of the Nuggets' hands, out of my hands. But he's got maturing to do. And I can tell you, if I'm like his coach and I see him answer that question, like, I have no idea what's going on with the in-season tournament. Like, dude, like, you're too aloof and you're too much of a fringe player to not be engaged. I was disappointed in that. All right, well, we're going to wrap it up. Guys, thank you for being here. If you're listening on Spotify or whatever platform, please like it, subscribe it. If you think we deserve 5 stars, please. We would love that. And then also, the best way to grow this podcast is organically, word of mouth. A Nuggets fan who doesn't, listen, just pass it along. That's all I can ask you to do. We've grown tremendously over the years, but we don't want to stop. So you can help out in that department for sure. All right, we'll leave it here. And whatever happens on Tuesday night on TNT against the Clippers, you already know we're going to turn around and talk about it on Thursday right here on the Mile High Hoops podcast.